Hello, this is just a short video to accompany my COMP266 submission. The course is now over for me, so you can use this video to kind of dissect what I've dropped in. Um, for the most part, you can learn a lot about what you need and almost everything straight from my learning diary, which was part of the course requirements. The documentation is deployed live via Sphinx, a static site generator. Use the left sidebar to the link that I provided on my blog post and in my submission package to go unit by unit and use it to weigh it against my source code. Unit 5 is an example. You can see my flowcharts and weigh that against the JavaScript that I wrote. In Unit 7, there is something good to note as well. There's a code block. You will not see this code submitted in my package. It is a serverless function that lives on my GitHub in a private repository just to protect the private API key that I did not want public. So the server function calls the server that I stood up and built to allow me to actually use this without leaking my key. When you do look at my package, the submission has 3 files. You'll notice source code's not in there, and that's because the AU Dropbox was 501 megabytes, where my package zipped was 586, so a little bit larger than the AU Dropbox allowed. The learning diary is the static site spit out to a PDF, so it is exactly the same as a live deployment. The learning mappings are the rubric, which AU requested, and the README file has the link to the Dropbox. I used a Google Drive Dropbox for my zipped code, and it contains links to the documentation and my GitHub where you can download the zip as well. If you're not familiar with GitHub, when you do get to the location, select code and then select download zip, and you will get the latest and greatest. You can also check my live deployment by selecting that link, which we'll get to in a second. Here is the documentation for COMP266, but you're probably more familiar with using the live deployment. This is the private repository I was mentioning. You will not be able to access or see this, and it really only has the serverless function. So I've downloaded the source code, and we can actually take a look at it together. When you unpack it, you'll notice that there are these folders here, and we will examine them right now. So on the left, you'll see there's index and home. That is the main website that gets served up. And I encourage you to read the comments because as you can see here in the welcome index.html, I repurposed this code block from Rassel in Unit 4. Wherever I did borrow code, there was 2 instances. I credited it in the comments itself. So this one here, and I'll show you where the second one lives. Inside of docs, there is a README, which has some project information, a GNU license, so if you want to reuse this code for whatever, go for it, a large styles.css with about 850 lines of code. Now, I didn't create this as one big style sheet. It's not best practices to do that. I'll show you how I did this. In the assets, there's a Sass folder, and I was already fluent in CSS coming into this course, so I wanted to learn something new, and Sass, which is valid CSS, was interesting to me because it's a more elegant and simple way of creating these modules and having a batch file spit out one large style sheet, which is awesome for maintaining really large style sheets. The sheet that you're looking for, this is the reset class, has a style standard by Tantec. I credited him there as well, and that is the second instance where I did not write the code. The JavaScript file or folder has all the JavaScript that I wrote, documented it in my learning diary, and icons and assets or icons and images just contains exactly that. If you want to take a look at my live site, you can open the index.html locally, or you can go to my live deployment, which is a GitHub pages, GitHub static site. And you'll see here that there's a loader that takes about 3 seconds to hydrate and preload assets. Once it loads, it brings you to the welcome index.html. And here you can see on the left pane, there's particles.js, which is the Unit 6 framework that I used, library. And on the right, there's a pane with an animated feature, and it contains a large scroll of information. Once you start getting to the news posts, all this is in Unit 7. It's the API from News API. On the tools navigation page, same particles.js on the left. And on the right, there's a GitHub API pulling in my repos. The course required that we use a table. So here's a table as well. And on the about page, just about. The cool thing that's worth noting is actually the media queries. If I show you, when we drag it, this was built web first, and then I ported it over to mobile and tablet. When you drag it down, the media queries will detect the width of the browser. And so mobile looks something like this, and tablet looks something close to this. If you want to actually open the inspector, in the console, you'll notice it's actually spitting out. I've got a small JavaScript code block here that'll allow me to actually debug which media query it's using. So that's what it's spitting out here. It's kind of nice because depending on what browser and what size window you're using, you can count on my website deploying correctly. So the course is now over for me. I hope this is helpful for anyone who's grading or going through my submission, and otherwise, thanks for checking it out.